The Hill, 9th of August 2023, Washington may take a cue from India's strategy with China. Every significant move made by the president and his administration is examined and critiqued as the countdown to the presidential elections gets underway. Republicans keep a close eye on the Biden administration and are ready for any small indiscretion. Luckily, they haven't had to wait very long. During the early months of the Biden administration, his staff avoided humiliating foreign policy blunders to maintain face. When asked about the successes and failures of the Wagner Group in the conflict, they stated that Biden's remarks on Taiwan, his confusion between Ukraine and Iraq, and his final prayer of God save the Queen were just blunders. There has been a blurring of the lines over the previous 6 months between small mistakes and strategic errors. Republican senators have been unable to avoid scrutinizing the Biden administration, especially regarding China policy. In addition to the controversy involving Biden's Hunter Biden and his purportedly illicit dealings with Ukrainian enterprises, the administration is being criticized rather than individual family members or personal matters. He has been under more scrutiny for failing to stop Chinese companies from taking advantage of the subsidies provided by laws like the Bipartisan Infrastructure Bill and the Inflation Reduction Act, for failing to sufficiently restrict Chinese investments in critical strategic sectors, and, more recently, for adopting a more accommodating stance toward China and Chinese companies, especially in the last 6 months. Unlike Biden's stance on Taiwan, these are not simply gaffes or tongue slips that the administration can readily retract. Recently, there have been indications that the Biden administration in the United States is adopting a deliberate strategy to restore relations with China through the resumption of discussions. The Biden administration has reportedly formed 2 working groups to help arrange meetings between the United States and China. Nevertheless, China continues to infringe upon and undermine American sovereignty, even while the United States sent envoys to Beijing and extended invitations to the Chinese foreign minister. It is purported to have installed police stations nationwide and sent spy balloons and spy stations to Cuba. China-sourced malware threatens the infrastructure of the United States, while the Chinese government tortures the relatives of dissidents. Wall Street and large corporations have both pushed for diplomatic relations with China. Furthermore, seasoned China specialists like Henry Kissinger have persisted in serving as links between the two countries. Republicans and Democrats who have expressed worries about China's multifaceted strategy and use of gray areas for political maneuvers have something to learn from New Delhi's approach to China as the Biden administration gradually moves backwards in its hostility to China, returning it to the pre-Trump and pre-COVID-19 era. Citing threats to national security, India banned more than 200 Chinese mobile applications, including TikTok, which is domiciled in Singapore, in response to China's ongoing border violations and the deadly attacks in the Himalayas. It kept several Chinese companies out by prohibiting or disqualifying them from seeking government subsidies. The latest is the Indian government's choice to turn down BYD, a Chinese automaker, on its proposal to establish a $1 billion manufacturing plant in India. China-specific protectionism is particularly severe in the defense industry, as seen by the recent import ban on drones manufactured there. Like Biden's supply chain review and the Inflation Reduction Act and bipartisan infrastructure law, which provide targeted subsidies for sectors of national security concern, India has employed production-linked incentive schemes to encourage conglomerates to address vulnerabilities throughout the value chain. This differs depending on the industry. For instance, the Indian government has offered to pay for half of the establishment costs of a factory in the semiconductor industry. It has pushed businesses in the pharmaceutical industry to invest in growing precursor facilities, which are lower on the value chain, to reduce their excessive reliance on China for that portion of the manufacturing process. While India can act quickly, the United States offers more safeguards for corporate rights and business than it does. Notably, in this instance, Chinese companies stand to gain from the strengthened democratic processes at the expense of U.S. national security. While the argument for and against TikTok's ban in the United States has primarily faded, India banned the app in 2020. The parent firm, ByteDance, the world's most valuable privately held company, defended itself in the U.S. against legislative challenges by arming itself with D.C. lobbyists, many of whom were former Biden administration employees. Bipartisan oversight of the congressional committee soon gave way to partisanship, as progressive Democrats like Representatives Jamal Bowman, DNY, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, DNY, voiced their support for the company. But TikTok is not an outlier. Numerous Chinese enterprises operating in the domains examined in Biden's supply chain assessment have established production plants within the United States. Notably, Republicans and Democrats have supported companies like Gotion and Cattle that manufacture batteries for electric cars. Nevertheless, India still faces challenges in reducing its reliance on imports, and Chinese investment has not stopped. Large Indian companies are still able to locate partners in China's mainland. It still has significant trade deficits with China as a result. What sets New Delhi's strategy apart from the U.S. strategy, specifically from the Biden administration's, is that it recognizes the severity of the issue and keeps plugging the gaps even as it struggles to wean itself off the dependence with mixed results. They say half the battle is won when you know the issue. Over half of the solution is in India. However, Washington is asleep at the wheel, except for legislative committees like the Select Committee on the Strategic Competition between the United States and the Chinese Communist Party. In the upcoming weeks, the Biden administration plans to unveil a system for reviewing outbound investments. To prevent making the same mistakes with the outbound screening process, it must be aware of the weaknesses in its inbound investment screening systems and take appropriate action to fix them. The strategy employed by New Delhi to limit Chinese investment may serve as a model for Washington's economic diplomacy. The senior fellow at the Pacific Forum is Akhil Ramesh. He has experience working with governments, think tanks, and risk consulting businesses in India and the United States.